Welcome back to Mortgage Matters with Pinnacle Mortgage Planning.
That's some happening music. You can hear that. That's kind of rock and roll. Pinnacle Mortgage Planning presents Mortgage Matters. Rod McLaughlin, your host today. We're with Steve Valenta from Pinnacle Mortgage Planning and Travis Newton from Northwest Lease Purchase, talking today about the lease option. The lease option may work for you if you have no other means to buy a home. It's one of the many options available to you. And I shouldn't say no other means. I'm just saying it's a good option. If you've been told up to now that you can't get in, well, maybe you can. Travis Newton, we've been talking about the fact that there are only a limited number of lease option homes available. First, why is that?
Well, there's only so many sellers that are offering, if they can't sell their home, there's only so many sellers that are willing to rent their home if they can't sell. So then that's when we propose to do a lease option and to offer a tenant buyer, or to find a tenant buyer for the seller instead of a tenant.
But if a potential buyer is interested in a property, that doesn't mean the lease option is off the table. Let's say that buyer could possibly purchase that property under that system. You can go back to the seller and say, here's what we can do. I can make this deal for you if you're willing to accept the lease option. So a potential buyer could actually create that deal or create that option.
That's right. That happens all the time. We have people that call us and say, this is our criteria, so we'll go out and call those sellers even if they're not offering a lease option at the time. We can educate the sellers on what it is, how it benefits them, and then see if they're willing to do that and let them know that we have a potential candidate for their house.
So potential home buyers, just put that phrase under your hat, lease option, is something you could use. And as Travis just explained, you may be able to talk a seller into using that system to allow you to purchase that home. Okay, we were talking a few minutes ago about the process. Travis Newton said you could go to him or Steve Valenta from Pinnacle Mortgage Planning, for example, and get the ball rolling on that. What's the next step, Steve Valenta? Once we've contacted you, maybe we have an idea, and I put some criteria out there, 2 kids, $200,000, 2 adults in the house. Maybe that's less important than the amount of money they have to spend. But what do you do about showing them properties at that point? Do they usually already have an idea of the homes they might want to buy? They've already looked at some listings?
I think they usually come in aware of what price range they're interested in. So what I do is I run a very accurate payment scenario based on that price range that they're looking at. Often online calculators will do an insufficient job in giving the client what a good, accurate payment for them is going to be. So it often is lower than what their expectations are. So when I run a true, accurate payment, it makes it realistic for them so that they're truly buying in their price range that they're comfortable in.
Do you ever find that potential buyers are a bit disappointed because maybe they're not getting quite what they want, having used the online calculators? And I've been guilty of that myself. I've used those calculators, but you're telling us now that that's not necessarily the best system to use.
Well, there's so many variables to the monthly payment, and often online calculators are limited in what they offer. It's a very simple calculation, and it's a complex calculation, and often a simple online calculator doesn't do it. So I'll have a client come to me and say, well, I ran my payments at this $250,000 purchase price, and you're telling me my payments are going to be $250 a month higher. And I explained to them what variables came into it that the online calculator didn't disclose.
So the online calculator is almost like the first draft. They just don't take all those variables into account.
They're good to use and they're fun to use, but working with a professional that is going to give them a true, accurate payment serves them well. What we also do as well is, let's say a 30-year fixed rate today is 4%. Let's just say that. I run a payment scenario based on that 4%, but the likelihood of rates being 4% 18 months or 36 months from now is very unlikely. So what I do for them is I run a payment at, say, 5%, 6%, and I run these different payment scenarios based on where maybe mortgage rates might be down the road. Mm-hmm. So again, it's all about protecting them, making sure, hey, if rates are 6% in 2 years, are you still comfortable with this monthly house payment? Can we still qualify you? And if the answer to that question are 2 yeses, then we move forward.
It seems to make sense to me, too, for all those reasons, to seek out the personal touch of a broker rather than trying to do it all by yourself online. Is that true?
Absolutely. Online has done amazing things for our industry. It's created more resources for buyers, and I think buyers need to use those resources to their fullest extent, but they come up short in terms of offering what a professional can offer in terms of in-depth advice.
I'm one of those guys, too, who likes to do it yourself as much as possible. But for a major purchase like a home, I can see there are just numerous traps you can fall into, things you just don't know, no matter how much you study up on the subject. So there's a lot to be said for the experience that a professional broker offers. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I think that's very true. And also, you would have a much better knowledge of the specific market, Vancouver, for example.
That's right. We genuinely look out what's in the best interest for the client. So we talk about worst case scenarios, we talk about risks, we talk about downside and upsides, and we don't take this process lightly. A lot of people's lives through this economic crisis, their lives have been ruined and turned upside down, and people were not given good quality advice on the front end, and that's what people deserve.
There was a lot of pressure on brokers, I know, during the boom years to make deals that probably shouldn't have been made. That's what was going on then. But with the tightening of the market, I think that's far less true now. That's why we have options like the lease option. You're still trying to find homes for people, but in a responsible manner. Is that right?
Yes. It's hard to put a price on true client care. And when you're looking out for the best interests of the client, in all arenas, it serves them well.
And in a small market like Vancouver, and it is a small town, we live in a small place, I would say that personal touch is more important than ever because I know where to find Steve Valenta, and I know where to find Travis Newton, and I deal with you guys not only, and again, it sounds kind of hokey to say so, but you are brokers and you are business people, and I deal with you on that level, but you are neighbors too. You're virtually a stone's throw from me wherever you go in Vancouver, so that's all the more motivation to treat the people right.
We have reputations to fill and lives to live, not just professionally, but personally as well.
And let's expand now on the process for the lease option. We've gone to you. We've possibly found a property we like. Travis, what are some of the things that can go wrong at that point? What could scotch the deal?
Well, once we're in contract, the biggest thing that can scotch a deal that we try to deal with up front is a seller not making their payments, and the buyer doesn't know, so they don't know till it's too late. The seller ends up going into bankruptcy, and then all their money that they put down is gone because they can't get the seller. So that's why we put in the protections up front to alleviate that risk.
And earlier, too, when we were talking off microphone, Steve had used the phrase skin in the game, which basically means you're making that little extra payment, so you have that investment. I decided to use scotch the deal so the previous generation would be represented. So we have our slang for 20 years ago in the game now, too. So that's one thing that could go wrong. What else can happen to maybe make this not happen?
Well, very simply put, a buyer could go in and destroy a property. They could also stop making their payments and then have to be evicted from the property. That's a risk on the seller's side.
So no matter how much quality control you do and how much you check everybody out and try and make sure everybody's on the up and up, things can still go wrong. Also, circumstances can change. Somebody could lose a job. Any number of things could happen. And the seller could have things happen in his personal life, too, that could affect the deal.
That's right, absolutely. And on the buyer's side, remember, it is just an option to buy, so they're not obligated to buy. If they get a job change and move to Florida, then that's great. They can get out of their contract with no questions asked. And
in worst case scenarios, maybe in a dark sort of way, that's another reason why the lease option is good. I mean, you could have catastrophic illness. There are just a death in the family. There are just a number of things that could go wrong that could shoot this thing down. So maybe the lease option, the option is the key phrase there. If things go horribly awry for you, you're not stuck with that deal.
That's right. And I deal with a lot of military relocation as well. And sometimes they're here for 2-3 years permanently, and they don't know if they're going to be here after that. So a lease option is a good plan for them. Instead of buying a home and then having to move and worry about renting it and selling it, they can do a lease option and be protected if they don't move.
I had not considered that. We'll be dealing with a larger military population, too, with the demobilization going on. So up in Spokane, I'll bet they're doing a few lease options, for example, up where the air base is.
Or they should be.
Yeah. Well, they may come down to Vancouver, too, where the quality of life is high and they can get a good deal on a home. Steve, Travis there has outlined a couple of the things that can go wrong with the deal, why it could collapse. Once you come to the point where it looks like everything's going to come together, what happens at that point? Do you sit everybody down at a long table and begin the paperwork?
Yeah, after we make application, what we'll do is gather the necessary documentation that supports the application. So we'll document income, pay stubs, W-2s, and bank statements. And we want to make sure that we can actually document what they've put on the application. So again, doing quality work on the front end to assure that they're actually able to do this.
And how long does that process take, that verification process?
It can take anywhere from a day or up to 5 days, depending upon the complexity of the borrower. Meaning, if they are a standard salaried employee that have had a job for 15 years, makes it fairly easy. If it's a little bit more complex, where maybe they're a self-employed borrower that has a little bit more complicated income, that takes more time.
I think, too, there might be complications. Somebody may not tell the truth on an application, their income or something like that, but there might be complications they're not aware of that could complicate things. And by that I mean maybe I have something going on in my personal finances that I'm not aware could have an impact on the deal. What's an example of that?
The list is long. In fact, with the guideline changes, banks have found more and more reasons to either not qualify a borrower or require more documentation. So whether it's length of time at employment, or whether it's a recent divorce or child support or alimony or real odd, unique situations or scenarios, my job as a professional is to exhaust the scenario and try to find out why can they not buy, what are going to be the pitfalls, and try to poke holes in it. And if we can't poke too many holes in it, then indeed we can assure them that they're actually able to buy.
Okay, hold that thought. We want to expand on that a bit. If we hit pitfalls, how can we get past those? We'll talk about that momentarily on Mortgage Matters. We'll also tell you how you can get a hold of Travis Newton or a hold of Steve Valenta and maybe talk more about the lease option. This is Mortgage Matters, AM 1550 and 1550talk.com, Vancouver's talk station.